Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will begin in 1 minute. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Wild Women Expeditions webinar on the Arctic. My name is Julia Wong. I am the marketing director. And today we have a very fun webinar for you all. Just a little bit of a lay of land. We will be going through a presentation, and any questions that you may have during the presentation, please feel free to enter it into the Q&A box. We will answer as many questions as we can live during the presentation, if it's on topic. Anything that we can't get to, we have a Q&A at the end that we can discuss and get to those questions that you have. And anything that we don't get to, if we run out of time, we will definitely reach out back to you tomorrow or the day after with some answers. So let's get started. Today we have with us panelists from both Wild Women Expeditions and Adventure Canada. With us, we have Jenny Martindale, Director of Program and Operations, Franny Bergschneider, Global Program and Operations Manager, Julianne Davies, Adventure Specialist, all who have traveled to the Arctic. And with us from Adventure Canada, we have Brenna Green, our Junior Sales Lead, and Lauren Coos, Junior Groups Coordinator. Thank you both for joining us. We're excited to have our partners here with us today. Going through the presentation, we'll have Franny. So take it off, Franny.
Hello, everyone. I'm Franny Bergschneider, and I work as the program manager at Wild Women Expeditions. I was previously an Arctic and Antarctic expedition guide, and I'm very happy to be going with Wild Women shortly on a trip to the Falklands, South Georgia, and Antarctica. I'd also love to do a land acknowledgement at this time. I'm based in Toronto, so I'll acknowledge the land here in Toronto. We acknowledge the land known as Toronto. We honor the past, present, and future of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit. Toronto is in Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and people, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And on that note, I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking about the land that is the Arctic. One distinguishing feature from the Antarctic and the Arctic is that the Antarctic is a continent surrounded by water and ice, whereas the Arctic is an ocean, or the North Pole, which is many meters of sea ice surrounded by land, and different countries occupy that land. So it can be divided into Canadian Arctic, Norwegian Arctic, American Arctic, and Russian Arctic, etc. We'll primarily be focusing today on Greenland and the Canadian Arctic, with a little bit of Scotland and the Faroe Islands thrown in there. And so we'll talk a little bit about why why we should be going to the Arctic, why travel to the Arctic. And I'll be moving through some slides that will highlight a few of the reasons that you might want to travel there. It's the perfect trifecta. It's a triangle of people, wildlife, and landscape. And any place that marries those three together is of deep connection to us. We're able to connect to the land, the wildlife, and also the history of the people, and how it's come to be. And that we get to experience Inuit communities and see firsthand how people live on the land and experience the land, and how they're supported by the land and the wildlife there. To expand a little bit on the community visits, we visit very remote communities on these voyages, some such as Kingate, which is, you might know as Cape Dorset. Also, this is a picture from Pond Inlet. And we also visit some remote communities in Greenland. We'll head to Ilulissat on one of our voyages, and Nuuk on another. This is a slide depicting some of the wildlife there. So you can see the polar bear, the narwhal, quite elusive. And this is a humpback whale tail. We'd also be looking for beluga whale, fox, and we'd always have our eyes peeled for seabirds. So we're often seeing birds such as guillemots, terns, the list goes on. The landscape, the land. I love this photo. I just took this photo on my iPhone, which many of these photos are taken from just little cameras that we each had, or from an iPhone. But the land in the Arctic and the sky, it's such a beautiful, vast, expansive, austere, vast land. And often the sky is just always doing amazing things, and the light. And so because there's no trees, you have a clear view of the sky, and you can just be captivated by what it's doing at all hours. I threw this picture in here just because it has a sun right there in the middle, and this woman here is wearing a Wild Woman shirt, of course. But it's also the land of the midnight sun. And so the sun will dip below the horizon very briefly. There is a short sunset and a sunrise on the trips that we will be on. But it doesn't spend too much time below the surface of the sea, below the horizon. It does this really neat thing where it kind of circles the horizon, and we'll be there at a time when it will dip below the horizon, but we have almost 20 hours of sunlight when we're on these trips. It's quite amazing. This picture is depicting what I like to call the ultimate adult scavenger hunt. And in the Arctic, we really have to work hard to find, well, we don't have to work hard at all, but we have to keep our eyes peeled, and we're always searching and looking. The wildlife is a little bit elusive because there's that famed terrestrial predator, the polar bear. And so we're always keeping our eyes peeled for foxes and bears, anything we might come across. But it's like the ultimate adult Easter egg hunt. An example of that is here. So we had been searching for days and days, and we finally, on Devon Island, found a mother and two cubs here. But you can see how you would really need to look for them because they almost blend into the landscape just there. This is a photo of all this lovely, luscious fireweed. Fireweed is the flower of Greenland. But it's a landscape of falling in love with the little things. And so as you're walking on the tundra and the terrain, you'll really start to notice that the tundra is alive. And there's all these little beautiful wildflowers everywhere you look. And you start to piece them together and create a collection in your mind of all the different flowers. This is a mountain on a hike we went on in Greenland. And it was a very early excursion just here, and it was quiet and contemplative, and we had a great time to reflect on this hike. And it reminded me that these Arctic trips are such a great way to disconnect from the fast-paced busyness of the everyday life. It gives you space and support to really reflect on your experience and on your life. And you can't connect, really. It's quite difficult to connect to the outside world. You're given an opportunity where there's no cell reception, not really any Wi-Fi. I don't encourage you to purchase onboard internet at all because it's not very good, and it's not very the connection isn't plentiful, shall we say. But again, it is such a great time to be quiet and disconnect from technology and the busier pace. I don't know how many budding psychologists are out there, but if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these trips, they're a ship-based trip, and so they create the space to meet all your needs. You don't have to worry about food or shelter. You can really quickly move through all the steps and take in the moments and be in that self-actualization box that we all really want to be in. This slide depicts the remoteness of these trips. So often we're going to places on these ships that we can't get to any other way. We can't fly to these. I mean, this is actually a photo of Iqaluit, so you could fly here, but most of the places that we go to, you won't have access to them by planes. They're really remote. This here's a photo of some northern lights. I will add a disclaimer here that only one of the itineraries that we offer has the opportunity to see northern lights if they appear, or if we're lucky enough to see them, and that's the Greenland Wild Labrador trip. It's just at the right time, at the right place in that sweet shoulder season in the fall. But it's truly magic what the sky will do when you hit that right latitude, and you make time to get out on deck and see what you can see. The ice. So it's a great place to go to the Arctic to see ice. This is quite a dense piece of ice. It's so blue. And you can see our ship in the background there. Another piece of ice with a vibrant blue background. And here is a glacier on Devon Island. So it's a great place to go and see ice. And if you're interested in also learning about climate change and viewing climate change, it's a place where you can go to have like firsthand access into the changing climates. You see them in real time. The changes are happening quickly and fast. So we'll move on to talk about why wild women expeditions. And each of us could probably talk about this for a really long time, but what I love about Wild Women is that we create safe spaces for women to really take up space and shine their brightest. So you get to be you with other people, other women who are shining with you and enjoying an experience in a safe and meaningful way. And while we're on board, if you're traveling with Wild Women, we've intentionally partnered ourselves with Adventure Canada, and Lauren and Brenna are here from Adventure Canada, and they'll speak a little bit later on. But there's a reason why we're partnered with Adventure Canada. They have a world-class cultural education program on board, and they have years in the business operating vessels in these remote polar areas, this Arctic area. And we also will have a Wild Women Expeditions host on each voyage, perhaps two. And that's really your personal concierge, so to speak. So the host will be there to answer questions. If you have problems or queries, they're there to help you. Some extra support getting ready for excursions. And then with excursions, you'll also have exclusive Zodiac rides and cruises, and perhaps some bonus onboard programming that's only available for Wild Women. When we go, well, coming up in 2023, we have 3 trips coming up. We have a high Arctic Explorer in July and Greenland Wild Labrador in September. And in 2024, we'll be offering Scotland and the Faroe Islands. And then in 2023, we'll be offering Scotland and the Faroe Islands. And in 2024, we'll be offering Heart of the Arctic. And we'll be moving into speaking a little bit about those specific itineraries just now. So this one is Scotland, the Faroe Islands, and Iceland, and I'll hand it over to Brenna to share a little bit about this trip.
Yeah, so our Scotland Faroe Islands trip is 11 days long. So this one starts in Aberdeen. It's on the Ocean Endeavour. And we spend, I believe it's 4 to 5 days in the Faroe Islands. So these are a clump of islands in the middle of the North Atlantic. And they're very, very hard to access. And that's a theme that you'll see with Adventure Canada. That's really where we're trying to go, is those places that are hard to reach. So you'll spend 4 to 5 days in the Faroe Islands, go to different places there before we head over to Iceland. In Iceland, we go to Heimaey and the Vestmannaeyjar Islands, and then we end off in Reykjavik there. Something that I love about this trip is that you can extend on either end. Aberdeen, you can spend some time in Scotland, and then on the other side there in Iceland, we end in Reykjavik. So there's lots of opportunity there to spend time on either end. The map, a little bit deceiving on the amount of time spent at sea. So I always like to point out when I talk about the North Atlantic trip that there's actually only 1 day at sea on this trip. And that's when we cross over from the Faroe Islands over to Iceland. I'll pass it back to you, Franny.
Thanks, Brenna. So the next trip we'd love to speak to is the High Arctic Explorer. And that's happening in July. So in 2023, I believe the dates are July 25th to August 5th. And this trip is 12 days long. It starts in Kangerlussuaq and heads up the west coast of Greenland, hits Ilulissat, and then some other stops for hiking in the Greenlandic area. And then we do a 1-day crossing. We cross the Davis Strait, and we start to explore Arctic Canada. And you can see on the map, we'll hit Bylot Island first and head to a community called Mitimatalik or Pond Inlet. And we'll be welcomed by a community there, experience a cultural show, view some of the Arctic games, see some of the Arctic handicrafts, and then we'll cross over to Devon Island. And Devon Island is an amazing island. It's high Arctic, so you're seeing that Arctic, the polar desert. Basically, it's desolate, barren. It's amazing, and it's the largest uninhabited island in the world. So we'll be looking for lots of wildlife. We'll be looking for ice and landscape, and really getting out there and seeing what we can see. It's on the east end there. It's the famed spot for the Franklin graves that we can see as well. And there's some old Hudson Bay ruins or huts, and good opportunities to see wildlife there, and as well as to see there's some ancient Thule sites on those islands, so you can really go and you can see well-preserved Thule winter homes in that area. And then we finish in Resolute and catch a charter flight back to, I think it's Ottawa. So that's that trip there. And I'll hand over to Julianne.
Okay, hi, everybody. So yeah, I was lucky enough to go do this trip just a month and a half ago in September. Absolutely, it's the only time I've been in the Arctic, and from what I can tell, it was an incredible time of year to be there. No bugs, the fall colors were stunning. Temperatures were beautiful. I think we had a bit of a special fall there. We had some really gorgeous clear days, but yeah, so we flew, we all met in Toronto, and we took a charter flight from Toronto up to Kangerlussuaq, which you can see on the map there. And then we basically transferred right away onto the Ocean Endeavour. And then we began our journey down the Kangerlussuaq Fjord, which is, I think it's a 192 kilometer fjord. In places, it's only a couple kilometers wide. So just stunning immediately as soon as you start the trip. And we ended up having, I think it was 3 to 4 days in Greenland. And I do remember our, the leader of the what was his name? Sorry, the leader of the trip, Jason, saying that, one of the main things you need to deal with is the changes in the weather. And so we ended up not going to Nuuk. We ended up going to Sisimiut, which is which is the corner picture on the right there. One absolutely beautiful village in Greenland. So that was really amazing, hugely cultural. We got to see some Viking settlements. We got to do a taste of Greenland. Amazing. So then we left. We had a day close up to the, in our Zodiacs, where we got right up close to the glaciers. Totally incredible. All the Zodiacs were out, and we were we shut off the engines, and we just sat there listening to the ice kind of do its thing, and really up close as you want to get. And at the same time, we had a group of kayakers who were paddling through these chunks of ice very safely, keeping a good distance because they had incredible guides, obviously. So that was just an amazing experience. And then the weather, because that was also, there was a bit of iffy weather at the time, but we made it across the Arctic Circle and across the Davis Strait. And that's where we ended up seeing the picture of the Northern Lights. Even with the cloud, it was completely cloudy. We still managed to see these unbelievable displays of Northern Lights a couple nights in a row. So that was really extremely special thing to experience. And then from there, we went over to the Torngats, which is, I think the picture on the left here, that's our first hike in the Torngats. Just as you can see, the fall colors were crazy. And so it was like that all the way down. We went from the top of the coast of Labrador, Nunatsiavut, all the way down, and we stopped at some really sort of historical and really interesting settlements along the way. And Nain in particular, we got to meet I thought it was amazing. We got to meet some locals, which, a lot of this is kind of, you're in the landscape, you're out at sea, you're dealing with wildlife, but that was a really special place because we actually got to meet locals that day and spend the whole day there. And then from there down, continued down the coast of Labrador, stopping in a few more villages, and went up a few incredible fjords, saw a couple polar bears. Of course, I did not. Every time they called, I ran out and they were gone. But and then from there down to Lanso Meadows on the tip of Newfoundland. And I don't know, I'm sure everybody may have heard about that at some point. One of the earliest, the earliest Viking settlement in North America. and we spent the full day there, and that was just awesome. And then from there, we went through the Narrows into St. John's, and the trip was over, but it was a 15-day trip, and it, you absorbed an incredible amount during that time, but I could have stayed on the boat for another 2 weeks for sure. But yeah, amazing trip, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions.
And we'll pass it over to Jenny to talk about Heart of the Arctic.
Jenny, I think you're still on mute.
Okay, I'll take out my headphones. Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, it was something with my headphones. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I had the privilege of heading up to the Arctic this past summer on what was the Heart of the Arctic expedition. It has been my dream to visit Baffin Island all my life, and so this is it made my Baffin Island dreams come true for sure. Yeah, this trip starts. We started with a charter flight out of Ottawa, and the charter flight lands in Iqaluit. So yes, so we started from Iqaluit, and it was interesting because as the nature of expeditions go, we were supposed to head out of Iqaluit quite fairly immediately with the itinerary, but there was some sea ice that had blocked us in. So a tour of the city was not included as part of the original itinerary, but to everyone's delight, actually, we were able to stay an extra day in Iqaluit and enjoy this really cool city. Meet some of the local people and see some of the very interesting history and architecture, and so that was a really extra treat. And then the next day, we were able to be led out of Frobisher Bay, led by an icebreaker. So this was a very unique experience as well. I'm not sure this happens too often, or maybe it does, but to be escorted out into the Hudson Strait by icebreaker. So we made our way up the coast of Baffin Island, the inner coast along Hudson Strait, and we made a stop in Kimirut, which is a very small little village. We were able to visit with the local community there. They were extremely welcoming. We had a fun game of, it was a version of baseball with the kids. Everyone was all dressed up with different little costumes that came off the I think you had a tickle trunk off the ship that everyone was sort of dressed up, and it was a lot of fun. I think the kids had so much fun in the community because it had been a while, I think, since they've had visitors post pandemic. So I think it was a really a nice treat for the community, and definitely for the passengers on the boat. And then we made it up. We carried on the voyage up to Kingate, which is known as Cape Dorset as well. And this, I think, is one of the big highlights of this trip. Kingate is an art hub. It is full of incredible Inuit artists. It has the Kanujuak Cooperative and print shop up there. So we had an amazing tour of the print shop. And I'm sure many people have now new beautiful prints on their walls, and as well as stone carvings that artists have created from that community. It's absolutely amazing. And then we continued the journey across to the northern peninsula of Quebec, or Nunavik, on the Angava Peninsula, and headed down along that coast. We did some wonderful hiking along that area. Spent a day hiking the tundra and really exploring one of the really attractive bays along there. And then we spent a day in Angava Bay, and this was a huge treat as well. As you can see on the map there, it's Akpatok Island. And that is the largest breeding colony of, let me get this right. Oh, maybe Brenna can help me. It's a type of mirror.
Brunix guillemot, or a thick-billed murre.
The thick-billed mirrors, yes, like thousands and thousands on these beautiful cliff faces, and of the mirrors, and I think it's the largest breeding colony in the world. I'm gonna say maybe, and beneath those cliffs, I think we spotted at least 9 polar bears. So that was a very cool excursion on Zodiacs from the boat in Ungava Bay. And then we headed over to the northern tip of, you can see the small tip there of Nunavut and Ungava Bay. And then we did our crossing. So the crossing across Davis Strait, I'm sure some of you might have some questions about how rough the seas are, and is this, what kind of crossing is this in the Ocean Endeavor and the boat. And it was, I think we were lucky. We lucked out on this voyage. It wasn't too bad. It was windy and it was a little shaky, but for the most part, I think it was. I think Jason, the expedition leader, said it was a piece of cake for some of the crossing. So we lucked out on that, and it was fine. And we ended up stopping in Nuuk in Greenland. So again, I was so excited to go to Baffin, but then when I got to Greenland, it's like, oh wow, this is another incredible place to see. And I highly recommend visiting Greenland, definitely. Nuuk is a wonderful city. I think it's about 36,000 people, and it has everything really a really nice little city can offer. And so we were able to visit and take a bus tour through Nuuk, do some shopping and buy some souvenirs, which was really nice. Little opportunity to, and also they have excellent museums in Nuuk as well. Then we headed up to the Kangerlussuaq Fjord. I think Julianne mentioned that they stopped there as well to do some kayaking. And one of the things that we were able to do and lucky enough to do, and this is all by choice, but Adventure Canada offers what's called the polar plunge. So they coordinated an afternoon of swimming in a Greenland fjord, and you get I'm going to show my little badge. You can see it's the Adventure Canada Polar Swim Team. So if you take the plunge in the fjord in Greenland, you can get a badge. And I think we're going to show a little video of some of the people that took the plunge a little later on. And then we headed up the coast, and this trip ends in Kangerlussuaq. So we would disembark the voyage in Kangerlussuaq and take the charter flight back to Toronto from there. And that's that trip. It's about 13 days long, I believe. And and the next Heart of the Arctic, it happens every 2 years. Correct me if I'm wrong as well. But it happened in 2022 this year, and it will happen again in 2024.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a few different types of excursions that we'll do on these different itineraries. There's 3 different types. So one excursion type that we'll do is something called a Zodiac cruise. And so we'll all get kitted up in our warm gear, like in the top right photo there, and we'll go out and see what we can see. We'll go on a Zodiac cruise, and we'll try to look at ice, or we'll try to find mammals. Maybe a polar bear has been spotted from the ship, and we'll get out in our Zodiacs and take in the views, or if there's a bird cliff, as Jenny was mentioning. Another type of excursion would be a hike. So we'll take a Zodiac to shore, and we'll get out and about and go for a tundra thump, and we'll see what we can see on a hike and get our limbs moving and our blood pumping. There's different kinds of hikes. Like you could sign up for a long hike, or an advanced hike, or a little bit of a shorter, more medium based hike. And then the last visit The last excursion type would be a community visit. So here we are in the bottom right there, and that's a community visit in Nuuk. This is a picture of us on a hike from Heart of the Arctic, getting out and about on the tundra. And here's a video we'd love to share.
I've been driving Zodiac since I was 8 years old. Oh, this job is super fun. It's just fun to wake up in the morning and be able to be on the water right away. Everybody just gets in the Zodiac and they're really stoked and they're like, where are we gonna go? What are we gonna see? That just pumps me up and makes me really excited to take them out and show them things that they haven't seen. So I'm just as excited as they are.
Zodiacs allowed us to go to some isolated areas.
There's a sandy bit in between the cliff and the water's edge, and there's a mom and 2 cubs walking from left to right.
Even allow us to get close to icebergs and then get close to glacier. And otherwise you can, without a Zodiac, you cannot have this proximity. And we've been by some pretty unique and large icebergs. That was amazing. We were still a bit of a distance from the glacier, but the sound of it, it just made me feel small. It's bigger than life.
So that was a video from Heart of the Arctic from this past summer. And as Jenny was talking about the polar plunge, here's a short video we have depicting one of our options on board, should it happen, is the polar plunge. So I'll just share this video here with you now. That was the polar plunge. And we also have adventure options on board. And the one here that we're depicting is the kayaking program. And that's available on request. It's a one-time payment and you have access to all the kayaking. Anytime there's a kayaking excursion offered, you're in the program and you can join the guides to go on that excursion. It's a really nice way to move yourself in that terrain and be completely quiet and self-propelled. It's a really nice way to take in the environment. Some other enhancements that are available on board are, this is Nancy, or her artist name is Nyap. She's on the left there. There's an artist in residency program, so you have access to learn and see an artist's process. There's also an onboard Nikon sharing and photography program, so you have access to borrow cameras and play with the lens, well, not play, but use the lenses. And that's available to sign up for when you're on board. So not before, but when you're on board. And there's also a biking enhancement. And just like the photo program, that's also available online for select excursions. There's also an onboard scientific program. And so there's lecturers and scientists on board. This is Dawn speaking. She's one of the onboard botanists. There's a marine biologist on board, archaeologists, ornithologists, and you'll have access to them out on the excursions, but they'll also be giving curated lectures that they've prepared and designed as part of the onboard programming series. There's also an onboard cultural program with cultural educators. And so they've also designed lectures and have interactive experiential activities for you to participate in and observe, some storytelling and throat singing, dancing, and games to start. And here's a slide that's depicting our ocean endeavor. And so this is our floating community here. And an important part to note is that there's a max capacity of 198 passengers. So we're not going to go over that. It's still going to be a small ship cruise or small ship expedition. And we have Jenny very kindly took a photo of her cabin, and so we have a cabin just to share as an example. It's a Category 3 twin share. So if you're curious about what the cabins might look like, this is an example of a Cat 3 twin share. What to pack? I know you've all been wondering, and there's probably a billion questions about what to pack in that question box right now. But I'd say the number one thing to pack, and that will enhance your experience probably by 80 to if not 100%, is binoculars. Bring binoculars, bring 2 pairs of binoculars, one for your friend who's going to forget her binoculars. I recommend 8x42, but the best binoculars you have are the ones you have. So if you don't have that mag, just put your binos in your backpack, or buy yourself an early Christmas present and get a pair. They're the best. Definitely recommend a waterproof backpack. And if you don't have a waterproof backpack, you can also get dry bags for inside of your backpack that you can make sure your stuff that you want to bring outside will fit into. You definitely want to have a waterproof backpack if you're bringing a robust camera outdoors, for example. You definitely need sunscreen, face sunscreen. Apply it probably 4 times a day, please. And sunglasses as well. The sun in the Arctic is very powerful, and as we talked about, it's almost 24/7. And definitely pack waterproof gloves or mitts, and pack 2 of them, a hat and a neck warmer. I put sunscreen on there twice. Silly me. Definitely bring 2 tubes of sunscreen and put it on 12 times a day. Just kidding. At least twice though, please, please, please. And this trip is an interesting one to pack for. So it's not about necessarily a certain number of pants or shirts. You want to pack in layers. So it's really important to bring a set of base layers. So a really warm pair of long underwear and a really long base layer. So I have my merino wool base layer that I wear. You could bring 2 sets of that, but one is fine. I think I had an extra base layer top just to switch it out every day. And then you'll need your mid layers. So you want another pair of pants that you can put over your long underwear while you're in the Zodiacs on a cruise, so that you don't get too cold. So I had my fleece pants, but if you had warmer wool pants, and then you also need, when you're out hiking, you might want a pair of hiking pants. And then you need your waterproof pants, super important, because we'll be in Zodiacs and you need to wear your waterproof pants while you're in the Zodiacs. I didn't put it on here, but it's really important actually to bring your hiking boots. They have muck boots on board, but you won't want to hike on land in those. So you'll get the muck boots on the ship, and then you'll bring your hiking boots in your waterproof backpack to shore, and then you'll switch out and you'll leave your muck boots at the landing site. And then you can bring some casual or comfortable clothes for the ship that you want to wear. So maybe some jeans and a nice shirt or a casual shirt, a fleece. And then you could bring a nice dress-up outfit for captain's welcome and captain's farewell. You don't have to do that, but there will be a sort of nicer event towards the end of the voyage, of like a sort of farewell voyage. I would bring extra batteries for your camera because they drain super quickly in the cold. It's remarkable. So if you have extra batteries, bring those, and if not, perhaps purchase one. And talk to your doctor about seasick medicine, because if you need some, you'll have to bring that with you as well. And we always recommend bringing a universal adapter. So that was a lot. So if there's any questions that come up about that, or you want some further explanation, please don't hesitate to ask. And I'll maybe ask Julia if there's any questions about that in the chat, or if I should move right on.
Can you just speak a little bit more about the possibilities of seasickness on the itineraries that we have? Is it one day just going through the Davis Strait? Is it going to be longer than that?
Yeah, I would say that's a great question. I would say that the opportunities for being seasick, are whenever there's a longer crossing. So it's not to say that we would be immune from being seasick when you're on the coast of Canada. It's just more rare because you're in protected waters. It's relatively flat, calm. And so you're sheltered in that regard. But when you're crossing, so for example, from Canada to Greenland on the Davis Strait, or when you're crossing from Scotland to the Faroe Islands, that might be, or from the Faroe Islands to Iceland, that's a little bit of a larger crossing. Anytime that there's a storm, because a storm is a storm in the ocean, so you might be in sheltered water, but a storm would come in and make the waters a little bit rockier, so that would expose you to seasickness. However, it is rare to be seasick when you're near the land. But yeah, it would be those longer crossings. Yeah. Are there any other questions about seasickness or anything else?
Not this time.
Great. Okay, well, I'll move along to the next slide. Oh, it's questions. Question time. That went fast. Gosh golly. Yeah, so we can open up the floor to a few more questions. And
we had one question. I know we answered this in the chat already, but just so that we can discuss it, what level of kayaking skill is necessary for those excursions?
What level of, Brenna, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that one. So if you want to apply, it is an application process for the kayak program because we want to make sure that everyone is safe there. We are out in the sea. It's not like we're on a lake or a river. So we do need to make sure that you have some kayak experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be experience on the ocean, but it does need to be some type of kayak experience, whether that's lakes, rivers, whatever that may be. And we do ask that you're comfortable. You don't have to have experience with it, but you do have to be comfortable with the idea of a wet exit. So that might be something that you want to do prior to, but that is something that is asked in the application process is, would you be comfortable with a wet exit? So that's something you want to keep in mind as well. So a bit of kayak experience and comfortable with a wet exit.
Perfect, thanks. And for the hikes, what level of fitness is required?
For the hikes, so the hikes are broken up into a few different categories. So when you go on a well, I should say, actually, when you go out on the land, there's going to be two options. One is that everyone will kind of go on the same hike. And if that's the case, it's because it's attainable and measured and easily accessible. And there might be and then the option number two, there's a landing where the terrain is varied and there's options for having 5 different options in terms of 5 different options for hikes. So there'll be a contemplative hike, for example, which is quite easy. You might not even leave the landing beach. It's like slow, measured. Yeah, it's probably not going to be very lengthy as well. Then you'll go up to an easy hike. So a little bit of an easier hike, not much elevation, not much ground covered, but slow and easy, and perhaps a interpretive component as well. So interpreting what you're seeing, a lot of interpretation for wildlife and animals and history. Then we move up into medium. So again, then the elevation would get a little bit higher and the length of the hike would be a little bit longer, perhaps around 5 kilometers. And then we get into moderate or advanced hiking, which is more elevation, longer length, perhaps about 8 kilometers. And this is just an estimate. It could, of course, be more or less. And then there'd be the very, very advanced hike, which is very advanced, more elevation, and it could be anywhere from perhaps 10 to 13 kilometers. Little interpretation, little time for photos. So it's kind of a broad range, and you can really pick your own adventure. That's the beauty of this opportunity.
Great, thank you, Franny.
If I could jump into Franny's, sorry, I just want to throw something in there for Franny's comment there. On hiking, all of these are laid out to you either the night before or the morning before. So the expedition leader always talks about the terrain, he talks about the elevation you might get, and you decide what you want to do every day. It's not like if you're wanting to do the extreme hike that you're stuck to that extreme hiking level for the entire trip. So you might do the extreme hiking on Wednesday, and then on Thursday you're feeling very exhausted from said extreme hike, and then maybe you want to do more of a moderate hike or the lower level hikes. But that's, like Franny said, like that's the beauty of these trips, is it caters to everyone on board. As we get to know you on board, we really start catering those hikes, and we learn how many extreme hikers there are. We learn how many moderate hikers there are, and we'll make sure that we always break you up into those smaller groups. But it really caters to who's on board. So any level of hiking is welcome, even if you're just wanting to get out on the land and just stand at the beach level and take it in. That's considered a hike as well.
Amazing, thank you. And to stay quickly on topic, do the hiking and kayaking expeditions happen at the same time? Do you have to choose one or the other?
Brenna, do you want to talk to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the kayaking program does always take place during our excursions. So if we have the group going out on land, our kayaking group would be going out at the same time. However, what we always try to do is end that kayaking a little bit before the excursion ends so that the kayakers can still get on land. So you might not miss that excursion entirely. You still will get some time on land, but you would be missing a larger portion of that excursion. And you can choose too, if there's a day where we're going kayaking, let's say we're in Ilulissat, for example, and we're offering kayaking that day, you can opt out of that. If you're really keen on getting into Ilulissat and you really wanted to see a particular thing in Ilulissat, you can opt out of the kayaking program that day. But it does take place during the same time. And we try to be mindful of the kayakers' time on land as well, so that they can get out, hopefully.
Perfect, thank you. A couple of questions about jackets. We noticed that I noticed the blue jackets and the red outfits in the kayaks. These are on loan during the course of the trip. Oh, as Jenny puts her jacket on.
As Jenny puts her jacket on, no, that jacket is not on loan. It's yours to keep for the duration of the rest of your life.
And it's a shell. It's not an insulated parka. It is a shell, so it's sort of the outer waterproof, windproof layer that you would wear.
And you can, there's a really great example of what I'm wearing here. Is I'm wearing a sweater and then a down jacket on top, and then the shell on the very outside. And even underneath of that wool sweater, I have a merino wool base layer. So it's really, really all about layers in the Arctic, and you will get that waterproof jacket to keep, but it's not insulated, as Jenny mentioned.
So then Mary asks, do we need to bring a heavy parka or coat?
So I would bring layers, and you don't need to bring a heavy outer coat, but definitely a great piece to have would be like a fleece sweater. And then I'm wearing like a mid-weight down jacket there. So those are some great pieces to have when you're on a voyage, such as this one.
Great. Manon asks, if you could only go on one of these trips, which one would you recommend for someone who wants to visit the Arctic? That might be a little tough to answer.
It is a tough thing to answer. It totally depends on what you want to see. So for example, if you've always wanted to go to Disco Bay and see the biggest ice, the ice fjord, then the high Arctic would be for you. And if you want to take your luck at potentially seeing Northern Lights, then maybe Greenland Wild Labrador is for you. It totally depends on what your priorities and vision is, what community visits you want to perhaps see, what wildlife you're interested in, what time of year you're interested in, that kind of thing. And it just goes to say that this webinar will end in a few moments probably, but we're not going anywhere. If you have questions such as which trip is for me, we want you to contact us and ask us those questions, because we'd love to keep the conversation going. And we have lots of people on our front lines who, well, Julianne gets to talk to lots of people every day, and it's so great to have experienced it. And we really look forward to continuing the conversation, as I said.
Perfect. I know we're cognizant of time, but I have a couple more questions that we have coming through. Are most women single travelers or traveling two or more?
That's a great question. I would say that there's not one isn't more than the other. So often what happens within Wild Women is you'll go on a Wild Women trip for the first time alone, and you'll meet lots of soul sisters and you'll want to travel with them again. And so often I've been on trips where people have chosen to go on more trips with the people that they've met again. And so it's this really beautiful community of people traveling together who met alone. And if it's your first time, you might be alone. You won't be alone for long. I'll tell you that much. It's such a beautiful, supportive community on board and in the world, actually.
And then with that, as there are 190 people on the ship, will we always be staying within our groups of Wild Women? There are obviously other people from other groups, but will we be mixing with those people?
That's a great question. Yes, because there is a larger group, a larger ADC group, and we have our Wild Women group. And it's when you're on the ship, it's choose your own adventure. So you can use the ship, your home base, really. You'll know where everything is. You'll know where the dining room is and the lecture room is, and there'll be a few things that happen every day. So for example, meals, we'll always eat with our Wild Women groups at set tables that have been designated to us. So we'll always meet at every meal. And then we'll often arrange to have little separate meetings in a location of our choosing. and we'll have those throughout the voyage. And we always meet every day after or before dinner for a daily recap and briefing. And we try to sit together as a group of wild women in the Nautilus Lounge during that as well. And then the hosts will make themselves available to you after the recap and briefing if you have any questions about what's coming up the next day. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I know we're running out of time and we're over time right now, but just one last question. How cold does it get?
How cold does it get? Oh my word, that's tough to answer. Well, okay, so it's the boreal summer. But within that, you're really covering lots of distance in all these itineraries. So I would say I had the luck and privilege of being on Heart of the Arctic and High Arctic this past summer, and some days it was 0 degrees and some days it was 15 degrees. So it really depends. It really varies. The best thing in the whole world is being so disconnected from your weather app and from your phone, and you're just disconnected. And every day you go outside, every morning you go outside and you say, you put yourself on deck and you just experience the weather, and then you'll know how to dress for the day. And then pack lots of layers in your backpack, because it could change. The weather can change wherever you go out and about. And when you're in the Zodiac, if you're on a Zodiac cruise, for example, and it's 5 degrees, but you're out there for 2 hours, you could get like by the end, it doesn't feel like 5 degrees. It feels like 0, for example.
Perfect. We have a couple of more questions coming through, but we'll answer those as emails and reply back to everyone individually, because I know we need to keep moving. So don't worry if you have asked a question, we will get to those answers.
Great. I'll just change this slide so you have a fun Wild Women group shot to look at.
And just to wrap up for the rest of the webinar, just wanted to let everyone know we have a couple of other webinar series coming up tomorrow. We are going to be speaking about the Antarctic. Franny will also be speaking about that. And then on November 30th, Julianne and Jenny will also be talking about Morocco. So those are the webinar series that we have for this fall. We will be coming out with more in the new year, so stay tuned. Otherwise, Fran, if you want to switch to the last slide. Just wanted to say thank you everyone for attending our webinar. Thank you to our partners at Adventure Canada, for Lauren and Brenna to be a part of our panel for tonight to help answer any questions and share their experience and insight. I hope everyone learned a little bit of something and gleans a little bit more inspiration on why they should travel to the Arctic with wild women. And if you have any other further questions, please feel free to visit our website, email one of our adventure experts, or call us or connect with us on social. We're here. This webinar has been recorded, so we will be posting this to our YouTube page as soon as we can. Otherwise, thank you and have a great day, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for joining us.